and I'll do part two. Okay. So I want to welcome all of you to our monthly meeting of the Amnesty International Bay Area Houston chapter. Our group number is 1017. We meet on the first Monday of each month at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, and we have approximately uh, 40 some registered members, um, and our membership, it's cost $30 for the family and $20 for an individual per year. It you If you are interested in becoming a paying member, you can either contact me or go to our Facebook page and send us a request, and I'll send you all the information that you need. Now, today's meeting, the main speaker is Diana Mushtaha. She is a uh, resident of the Clear Lake area of Houston. She is currently a student, a senior at University of Texas in Austin. She is studying international relations and Middle Eastern studies. She's planning on studying international law in the coming year. She is a staunch Palestinian and American activist. She has witnessed two intense periods, a period of Israeli violence in the Gaza Strip. First, it was in 2014 during the Operation Protective Edge, and then this year in 2021 during the Operation Guardian of the Walls. Currently, she is in Jordan, about to cross over to the West Bank, specifically to Ramallah, to study the Palestinian question at the Birzeit University. She will be talking about a brief history of the conflict, including some root causes of the conflict and escalations and recent events that led to the massacre she witnessed in Gaza, as well as her personal experience in Gaza and what has happened after the ceasefire. So please join me in welcoming Diana Mushtaha. Okay,
Thank you.
Diana, go ahead and go. You have approximately 20 to 30 minutes to do your presentation. And then before we go into Q&A, I have Edie Harwood from Amnesty International USA. She is the country specialist for Israel, occupied territories, and Palestine. And she's going to speak for a few minutes, and then we will take a Q&A. Attendees are requested to put their questions in the chat, and we will either Ruth or I will then prompt you to unmute yourself and ask that question. Okay. So go ahead, Diana. Thank you.
Okay, great. So first, I just want to make sure that you guys see my screen correctly, that my Zoom window isn't covering or anything. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
It looks good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so before I get into more of the recent developments and my experience in May, I know that this is a very complex issue for a lot of people, so I just wanted to touch on a little bit of historical context, some root causes, try to break it down into more, into something that's easier to comprehend than multiple opinions and, just strictly keeping it fact-based. So I want to take it back to the Ottoman Empire, which seems like so long ago, but this was, approximately a little over 100 years ago. So during the Ottoman Empire, before World War I, before the dissolve of the Ottoman Empire, Palestine was a part of the Ottoman Empire. Muslims, Christians, Jews lived in the area. There was no sense of conflict, aside from Arab nationalism uprising towards the end of the century, the 19th century. It was compared to the situation now, very peaceful. And so all of this is kind of happening around, on the backdrop of the escalating anti-Semitism of Europe And that is what I see as one of the main root causes of the issue, and the exporting of that problem into a different land. So as we all know, prior to the Holocaust, anti-Semitism was building up in Europe, and the Jewish community saw it fit to leave and go somewhere where they felt safe. And some of you might know this, but a couple of different countries were in question when that was brought up. And actually, what was surprising to me to find out is that many of the Jewish population there were actually against the idea of leaving. They were very comfortable, aside from
universities. The Texas Book Festival is held on state property every year. I'm on the board of advisors. Am I not going to be able to discuss my book there? I've got a lot of questions.
What's going on?
Hey,
I'm on the board of advisors. Am I not going to be able to discuss?
Hey, Ruth, can you mute him?
If that's iPhone, I don't seem to be able to. Everyone else is muted.
Oh,
Okay,
well,
go ahead,
who's that?
Diana, I'm sorry.
No worries. No, it's okay. It's okay. So, yeah, as I was saying, something that I found out, that I learned recently was that many of the Jewish population in Europe did not think that this was the best course of action to just create their own state on some other land. For many different reasons. One, they've already built a life in Europe. Two, there was nothing really urging them to make this change. Three, some people thought the idea of a Jewish state was in its essence kind of racist, creating a state strictly for Jews. And that's actually some people still hold that ideology today, that Israel in its essence creating a state that is strictly for Jews is a racist concept. And so it was brought up that, well, to persuade the Jewish community to be on board with the creation of this Jewish state, there has to be a drive. And they found the easiest or the best way to do that was the historical attachment to Palestine. And that's how they chose their location, essentially. And then it goes a little bit, it gets a little bit more complicated after World War I. After World War I, some of you might know, the mandate system was created by the League of Nations, and Palestine became a British mandate. And so the mandate system it's kind of a veiled form of colonialism and occupation. And we'll see that a little bit later, especially now it can seem more apparent, but at the time that was not apparent. Actually, the British were from the very start very involved with driving this issue to the extent to where it is now. Even the authors of the Balfour Declaration probably did not know the extent of what they were doing at the time, but the British had a role to play in stirring up tensions between the Arab nationalism against the Ottomans. They had a role to play, of course, with their mandate of Palestine. They also had a big role to play in, of course, the Balfour Declaration. And I'll talk about that in my next slide a little bit more. But the Balfour Declaration basically is the document that made way for the creation of a Jewish state, that alongside the intervention of an international community, UN Resolution 181 was seen by the Israeli nation as an okay, go ahead, green light to establish the state of Israel. And that was in 1947. And so you see less than a year after 1948, that was the establishment of Israel. So basically, I'll talk a little bit more about the Balfour Declaration. I can actually show it to you guys if it will let me. Here we go. So this is the actual Balfour Declaration, and this is a very significant document till this day, a century later. I've highlighted and read a couple of just notable words. If you want, I can give you a minute to read it. Most people will hear about it, but haven't never actually read it. So the reason that I highlighted these three parts, so you see the government, the government views, government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Okay, so national home, keyword. And then over here, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. I also think it's interesting that they use the words non-Jewish communities in Palestine instead of the Arabs or Muslims or Palestinians, non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. And so I think this is very interesting because when you put it in perspective to today, the civil and religious rights are most definitely being prejudiced, as we'll touch on a little bit further in a couple of slides. But I think it's just very interesting that this document was made even before Palestine became a British mandate in 1920. This was made 3 years before. So before Palestine was even a British mandate, it was there was the intention that Palestine was to be given to the Jewish people to establish a state, although it was inhabited. And it was very reckless, and it's one of the biggest root causes of the issue. And if any of you guys are wondering what why was British so interested in the Jewish problem in Europe, and there are many reasons for that, but as most political issues come down to, it came down to power. The Middle East was a region of question at the time. It was, especially after the whole Suez Canal incident in Egypt. Palestine is in the backyard of the Suez Canal, and so it was security. There was going to be a colonial state to be an advanced post for Europe, and that is why British showed so much interest. And this is actually a question that I've asked myself throughout years of studying this issue. And it's very complex, and I guess we'll never really know the reason, but it comes down to power, from what I have learned and what the research that I've done, what I've seen myself. So I also want to show you guys a map of Palestine, and you can see, if you look at the numbers, historical Palestine in its totality was about 27,000 square kilometers. Today, Israel, and this number is growing as well, Israel covers almost 21,000 square kilometers of historical Palestine. And so actually something that might further interest you guys, let me see if I'll be able to share a different screen. Let me do stop sharing and then share a different screen. How about that? Okay. Okay, so if you can see this, this is a something that I thought was, oh, why did it do that? Please go back. Here we go. Okay, so you can see how things have changed over the course of, oh my God, why is it? There we go. Over the course of 100 years. And I'll just flip through this real quick because I don't want to take up too much time on historical context. But from 1917 to 1939, this was the time that I'm talking about with the British mandate after World War I. You can see that, Jews made up 3% of the population. Fast forward a little bit, Jews make up 33% of Palestine, and the darker areas, that's Jewish immigration and settlements. Fast forward less than a decade more, and you see it basically reversed, it goes from this to this in the span of 10 years. Arabs go down to 22%. That's land control, not population. And the Jews take up 78%. And this was also the time of that UN resolution that I discussed. And so this is the reason why it's so intense is because Israel was established in 1948. And so you see a massive surge in immigration and a massive decrease in the amount of land that the Palestinians occupy. And this is during the 1967 war, another uprising when they proclaimed Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And basically you get the point now. It's very, very difficult to see that. I think that kind of puts it in perspective. Let me stop sharing and go back to the presentation. Yes, and so there was just one thing I want to touch on with this map. If you see at the bottom here, the number in red, this is going to come into play when I show you guys some videos that I took in Gaza. So, you know, when we hear about the news of Gaza and you know, Israel, and they're at war again and bombings and whatever, it becomes kind of normalized, but you don't really realize the amount of damage that, you know, one missile, you assume it's like an empty area, you know, it's not going to be in a place that's highly populated, but the Gaza Strip is the highest, it has the highest population density in the world. It's 4,700 people per square meter. For my Texans, to put this into perspective, it's half the size of Austin with double its population. And Austin is already a very populated area, as most of you know. And so I thought that was interesting during the war. I kind of looked that up. And so that's just to put the historical context into situation. If you guys have questions about that, I'll be happy to answer questions if I can at the end of it. But so I am okay on time. Let me go ahead and go into a little bit of my own experience. Like Brother Nasrullah said, I've been through 2 intense periods of Israeli oppression against Gaza. I've witnessed more things than I think a 24-year-old would have expected to at this point. And you know, I wasn't planning on it either time, but say the summer before college, I was in Gaza visiting family for the first time in quite a while, and things broke out. They called it Operation Protective Edge, and you know, that doesn't really mean anything until, you know, you put it into visual. And it was the first time that I had seen something so atrocious, and I really didn't understand the whole Palestine-Israeli conflict until I saw it, even though I was Palestinian. But just being born and raised in the States, you know, I knew that, you know, my heritage came with a lot of baggage. I just didn't really understand how much and how intense and what it felt like to live in Gaza until that summer. And then fast forward to 2021, and I'm in the same position again. Who knew? And, you know, I have my friends telling me, how come every time you go over there, something bad happens? And I'm like, well, I guess I just have bad luck, you know. Fun fact, I was in Turkey during the coup. I was in Egypt during the revolt, during the revolution, and it just seems like everywhere I go, something seems to happen. So I just need to stop traveling, I guess. But in all seriousness, in 2021, in this May, it was, though I had been through this experience before, actually the first day of it, you know, I called my dad and he was like, how do you feel? And I'm like, well, it's okay, I've been through this before. And he's like, that's not the response that I was expecting. You know, I'd assume, you know, 24, you have your whole life ahead of you for you to be absolutely terrified. And I was like, well, I'm okay. I'm stronger than I was when I was 17. And I think I know what to expect, but in all honesty, I did not know what I was about to witness. And it was absolutely terrifying. I see myself as a very strong woman, and the few hours that I did sleep, it was just full of anxiety. And I think I sent my sister and I love you text maybe like 3 times a day at least whenever I got net. And it's very difficult for me to talk about it. I think I honestly still have not processed it completely, but I will show you guys some of the media that I was able to take. I do want to give a little bit of a heads up. Some of the sound might be a little bit of alarming. We were in a as you know, most of Gaza is a very populated, all of Gaza is a very populated area. And so, and we had a rooftop apartment. And so we could see almost every bomb that hit and every missile, we could hear the sound. The drone was 24/7. The drone is actually the reason why most people don't post from Gaza, because they're afraid that the next missile will come to them. I felt a little bit more security than them. I won't say it's because I was brave. It was because I felt more security because of my American passport. US Embassy knew where I was, and I was like, well, they won't do it. It was a risk, but I think it was worth it because of the attention that it got. I was posting on social media throughout the entire thing when I could. And so I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys some of those videos and pictures now. So this is a picture from inside our apartment. The door was open. On most nights, this was, I think, on night 4 or 5. Where it's become basically a regular thing at this point. We had our doors open because if you keep your doors and windows closed, the impact tends to shatter and cause more damage than if you keep them open. Most people actually, if they're able to, they remove their windows entirely so that the glass does not shatter. And I'll show you a picture in a little bit of us in the windowless corridor because it's the safest place in the apartment when things start to get rough. And which was every few hours then. And so I was sitting down, I was playing cards with my cousins to try to get our minds off of the intense situation. And we didn't have electricity at that point. And so it was the only thing that we could do. We were trying to take our mind off the anxiety. And then I heard the F-16 flying over us, and I don't know, it was just instinct to get up and take this picture. And it looks very intense and it felt very intense. And there were many more like this, but I'll actually show you guys a video next. So brace yourselves. I don't know how the sound is. And that is my poor mama in the background. I think she's on here actually. Hi, Khawda. She was so mad at me that I kept doing this, but I think it was very important to capture these moments because it's very hard for people to realize what's going on until you show them the actual sites. And I think this was at like 5:30 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. The sun had just rose, and so we were not sleeping during those days. And here is another. Oh, this is the same one. Here we go. So as you can see, when it gets rough, it gets very rough. And so those videos were right after each other. And that was when she dragged me into the corridor and told me to stop being stupid. And so, and she was right. It was a building very, very close to us. I'll actually replay that. The sounds are very intense. And so you can imagine a 3, 4, 5-year-old hearing this and not really understanding what's going on, but being absolutely terrified. And here's one last video. Here we go. And so in this one, you can actually see when the bomb actually hits the ground, and you can see the fire. So I'll play it 1 or 2 times. So as you can see, like I said, Gaza is very densely populated. And so when they hit one building or one home, it affects all the buildings around them. And I'll show you guys a couple of videos of the destruction. or a couple of photos of the destruction right after. And it's absolutely heartbreaking, but this was our norm for 12 days, from the 10th to the 21st. We were just used to it by the end of it. And every time they said ceasefire, we didn't believe it. And it took about like 4 days for it to actually happen. And even then it was, a ceasefire. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the next photo I want to show you is of my cousins. And the youngest one over here, Yusuf, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but he's 3 years old. And I'll show you another very heartbreaking photo of him in a little bit. But we all slept together because they refused to go home. We were, by the end of it, about 4 families in a 2-bedroom apartment. And they live right down the street. One of the families lives right down the street, but they refused to go home because, and my aunt told me, she was like, we're going home. I wanted to shower the kids, get some clothes and come back. And they were telling me, Mama, hurry, let's go. And she's like, what are you talking about? We're not like visiting. This is our home. Why are you in such a rush to go back? And they're like, we need to be with the Americans. We're safe with the Americans, and so it was, and this is why they stayed with us. All of them were terrified. Actually, what I think it came a little bit of as a shock to me that the older ones were scared, were more scared than the younger ones, I guess, because the younger ones didn't really comprehend yet what was going on. But the 12, 11-year-olds, they were the ones that were more scared, that would, cuddle with my mom in the corridor. There was one that had a security blanket throughout the whole crisis and started sucking her thumb again. And it was like a little bit of a reversal, and it was because of the trauma that she was going through. This next photo, this is my cousin Yusuf again. And so one day I came to him and I found him standing at the door like this, and I asked him what he was doing. And he said, with the toy gun in his hand, he said, I'm protecting us. They're going to come. He's going to come and shoot us. And I was so thrown back because I didn't think that a 3-year-old understood or would comprehend these things. But, this young man, and I can say that now after what he's seen, this young man, knew the words in Arabic for missile, bomb, ceasefire. These are words that I didn't know before this. I didn't know the word for ceasefire because I haven't been there for one before. And so it just astonished me. And he, this 3-year-old man, felt the sense of responsibility to protect his siblings, and he would come and he would actually pat his sister on the back and be like, it's okay, that one was far. And, and so he started to comprehend kind of that they were in a scared state. There was, his sisters were terrified, and he's kind of saw his dad reassuring them. And so he would do the same thing. And so I just think that it was very depictive of what most Palestinian children probably feel. And, it kind of like surprises me almost that there is still hope for peace in that generation after they've seen so much. It's honestly quite astonishing. It's a very divine thing to feel. And you can see that. I wish I had put one of the videos of after the ceasefire, but you would see the streets were just filled with joy and people cheering and hugging each other and saying, I'm so glad you made it. I'm so glad you made it. I had 7 a.m. the next day, I went out to take some pictures of the destruction before things started getting pushed aside and the roads filled and stuff. And he stopped me and he was waving and he was like, Alhamdulillah salama, thank God you made it. You're safe. And I didn't know this man. And it was just a very heartwarming feeling that after such destruction, you can be so friendly to a stranger. And it was just, we felt like it was like a sense of community. Like we went through this together. This experience brought us closer. We made it, and so let's see and so when we talk about ceasefire, the thing that I want to express is that, yeah, ceasefire is great, but also what comes after a ceasefire. So we've we've lost people, we've had buildings destroyed, and they call ceasefire. And so now what? What does that fix? You know, a ceasefire does not mean the end of Palestinian oppression. A ceasefire does not rebuild the homes that were lost. A ceasefire does not bring back Palestinian brothers and sisters that were lost. And, you know, it doesn't mean that the life of Palestinians is changing. And so we have to keep that in mind when we talk about a ceasefire. And so these are the photos that I was telling you about, the destruction that I took photos of. This was Burj Hanadi. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but this was one of the biggest residential buildings that had collapsed. I think it was 15 or 18 stories, and about 50 to 70 families lived in it. Families, you know, 50 families. And so, you know, so many individuals lost their home. And here are more pictures of that same building, you know, just absolutely, like, it was uprooted from the ground. Like it was just such a astonishing thing to see, like very, very heartbreaking. And this is Arimal. It's the marketplace, actually. So there's only one mall in Gaza. For us Houstonians, that might sound like a bit strange because we have probably like more than like 20. And so, you know, this was our one mall. This is like their market street basically. And like I said, you see this picture on the right. When one building falls, it's not just that building that is affected. This building literally fell on top of 3 other buildings, and all of them were damaged. And so you see like a whole bunch of news reporters out and showing the destruction. This was the day right after. It was just so crazy to see these things. This picture right here actually was why people don't leave their homes, even if it's a short trip during you know, during those 12 days. I know you guys can probably relate now with Corona, how it feels just being at home for a week and, you know, not even going to the grocery store. It feels horrible. Then, you know, imagine the sounds of bombs and no electricity, sometimes no water during that. And it can be a very, very stressful situation. And so this man, he actually died in his vehicle. He was hit by a missile going from one house to another, and he unfortunately did not make it. And seeing this was very saddening for me. And it was right in front of they put the police sign in front of it so that people wouldn't hit it, because it was the day right after. And so things were still not moved. And then these are just a couple of pictures from after things settled down a little bit. We were able to go out, give some hot, warm meals to some of the families that lost their homes, and give them just a little bit of money and ask them how they were doing, what they needed. I set up a link if any of you guys are interested. If you type in my name on Instagram, I do have a link in my bio for Donate to Gaza. And these are the families that we're going to be helping through those donations. We've already collected $12,000, and we're planning on just helping them with a couple of furnishings, you know, clothes, mattresses, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. But this family, actually, it was four different couples, or like families that were all related in the same building. And their building collapsed, and you can see the men in the background just sitting on the destruction. I think they were drinking coffee. And so I thought that was very interesting. And then this cute little boy insisted to take a photo of me when I was giving him his warm meal for his family. And it was just, he still had a smile on his face despite everything that he had been through. And it was very heartwarming. So just to talk about, I know I've taken up quite a bit of time, but, and I want to get to question and answer, but, just to talk a little bit about what's happening now. I know most of the media is not covering Palestine anymore. Don't be fooled. That does not mean that things are not going down. So you may know the Save Sheikh Jarrah movement. You know, it was trending on all social media. That was Sheikh Jarrah was the Israeli settlement, the planned Israeli settlement that caused the commotion in Gaza. Gaza was defending the Palestinian territories and got kind of sucked into the middle of the West Bank conflict. And so unfortunately, the same thing is happening now. History tends to repeat itself. It's unfortunate, but a area called Silwan with about 1,500 Palestinians is they're currently being uprooted. And what baffles me is the reasoning behind this one. It's probably the most just why to me, why? Because you'll never guess why. Why are they uprooting 1,500 Palestinians? And I'm so sad to say that it is because Israel believes that it is absolutely necessary to build a theme park in this area. They're uprooting 1,500 Palestinians to build a theme park, a religious theme park, which I'm not exactly sure what that means, but when you put religion behind it, then I guess it's justified. And so all I have to say is that, like I said, history does repeat itself, and until we educate ourselves and continue to speak up for those that don't have a voice, history will continue to repeat itself. And so I'm very happy that we are all here today discussing it, because talking about it is the first step. I know, like I said, it's a complex issue, and so people tend to shy away from it. They tend to get uncomfortable around it. But the more that we understand, the more that we expose ourselves to these things, the more we become enlightened on what's going around in the world around us. And I am so grateful for you guys to have had me speak today. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. If anyone has any questions about just anything in general, I am happy to answer.
Hey, Diana, what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask Edie to talk for a few minutes, and then we'll go into the Q&A.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So just a little brief introduction on Edie. Edie Garwood is a country specialist covering Israel, the occupied territories, and Palestine for Amnesty International USA. She's responsible for working closely with the country team on the ground in the region and AI USA staff on strategy, membership mobilization and support, lobbying efforts, and media. She has been a member of the Amnesty International since 1984 and was country coordinator for Israel and the occupied territories during the first Intifada in 87 to 94. In 2002, when much of the occupied territories were declared a war zone, she participated in nonviolent direct actions in the occupied West Bank by riding in ambulances and helping in a children's summer camp in a village just released from a strict 4-month curfew. She's a recipient of the 17th Annual Human Rights Award by the Human Rights Coalition of North Carolina in 2012, and the keeper of the Flame Award by Amnesty International USA in 2017. So please join me in welcoming Edie to talk for a few minutes, and then we'll go into a Q&A for both of you. Go ahead, Edie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mohammed. And Diana, that was just a wonderful presentation. That was fantastic. And I really appreciate you inviting me, because it's good to have a resource from Amnesty International to try to figure out. So we just learned about what's happening in the real world, and how does that impact or relate to what we're doing in Amnesty International. So that bio was pretty thorough. So I'm not going to talk about the role, other than it is the role of a country specialist to help support local groups. Our number one job is to help advance the work in the US section of Amnesty International, which is a global organization. Our assigned country or theme, and my assigned country is Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories, and the state of Palestine. And so I work with the section staff I work with the country team on the ground as well as personnel in our international secretariat in London to help support staff do work, but also to support local groups do work. And so Amnesty International, it is a little complicated a region. I'm glad Diana went over the history and showed you maps, because all our work is based on international law, international human rights law, international humanitarian law, and standards for businesses. We usually target governments, but we'll also hold businesses to their responsibilities towards human rights. And so there are different people with different jurisdictions in the area. Our concerns with the actions of the government of Israel, we address to Israel. We address our concerns in the West Bank to the Palestinian authorities that have jurisdiction over the areas that they have control over. Israel is still an occupying power of the West Bank and have ultimate control over the whole area. But the Palestinian authorities have control over the detention centers and the actions of their security forces. And when we have concerns in the Gaza Strip, Hamas is the de facto administration of the Gaza Strip, so we'll hold them responsible for actions there. We usually document and respond to international human rights law, but in that region, we also enforce international humanitarian law because there's the situation of military occupation, which falls under international humanitarian law. And then you also have periods of time, like Diana talked about, where you have an escalation in violence. It's considered armed conflict. So then we look at the rules of war, discrimination, proportionality, things like that. And so that's all I'm going to say, except other than you can keep informed about what Amnesty International is doing on Israel-Palestine. It's not always easy to know what we're doing because it's such a global organization working on so many different areas. But we are on social media, and we also put out a newsletter at least once a week, if not more, with the latest actions, statements, reports, developments in the region that relate to the work we're doing. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to type my email during the Q&A in the chat. Shoot me an email. And if you want to join the newsletter, let me know. It's just a Google list. I'll add your name to the Google list. And if you want to follow us on social media, I can tell you what accounts we have. We're on Twitter, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel where I archive any digital stuff that's been put out by Amnesty. So I think that's it. I'll just put my email in the chat. And if you have any questions, that'd be wonderful.
All right. So the first question that I think that's a question from Alex regarding people not being able to post anything because of the drones. Alex, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Sure, Diana, thank you so much for especially the facts on the ground and the pictures and so on, because that's the reality that we envision is so different from the actual reality. And I was talking with some people in Gaza today, and they tell me that they can't even take videos outdoors. It's illegal to do that. And you know, they talk about schools being on 2 shifts. You know, something that's like mind-blowing to me, and so on. And so I'm curious if you could just describe to us what is it like with drones flying all around, and describe more in detail about the fear of posting and so on. Thank you.
Of course, yes. So thank you so much, Alex. Yeah, so basically, even before things started to escalate, the drones were 24/7. But I noticed, and actually my mother noticed as well, that the drones were a bit lower during the intense escalated period. And it's because, and this is from what I understand, people are scared to post and to video and to even have their phones out in balconies or rooftops or anywhere outdoor where the drone can see them, because I don't think it's or they don't think it's a coincidence that it's happened several times that someone has done this and the next missile will be aimed at them. And so there is this fear that drones pick up signals, that media being posted can be tracked, so on and so forth. And so the Gaza community is just terrified of posting because, you know, they don't have an escape like I do. At the end of the day, you know, when borders open up after the war, after the ceasefire, I'm able to get out. I'm in a safe place. They're not. I don't know if you've seen Hamad al-Kurd in the West Bank, and he was one of the families in Sheikh Jarrah that were he's part of one of the families that were being expelled, and he was, you know, he was on CNN, a lot of different like news channels, was posting all on his social media. And when things got, when he got big, the Israeli forces showed up at his doorstep and imprisoned him. And so there is no freedom of speech over there like we have over here. And so that's why people are scared to post, to speak out. What's more is that if someone is too popular on social media or is too active, you know, is too much of an activist, and their name crosses by, you know, the, you know, an Israeli's radar, they get put on a list, what we call the blacklist. It's not like a real blacklist, but it's a list. Coming and going becomes more difficult. You become, all of your actions become tracked. I was actually on a website, what is it, Canary Mission, for quite some time after I spoke out in 2014, and then they took me off, and so I don't question it, but it was, and so this is why people sometimes don't speak out, but of course these sort of things don't stop other people, and that's what I try to encourage, you know, despite their trying to oppress our voice, our voices will be heard. Does that answer the question enough, or thoroughly enough? Perfect. Okay, great.
Does anybody else have any questions? Or Alex, do you want to mention your book?
Yeah, so I don't want to take from Diana's time at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've just published a couple books. One is How I Learned to Speak Israel, which is about the language used to mislead us on the whole conflict, and it goes through a lot of the history that Diana described, and it provides a context it's an easy read, but it's difficult in terms of when we realize how much we've been misled. So anyway, I'd recommend that as background if you'd like. I'm curious how the process was, and again, I don't want to take a lot of the time, but I'm very curious about what life is really like there and such. And I'm curious how you were able to get in and out. Did you go through Eretz? Did you go through Rafah crossing? And what was involved with that? And maybe you can describe that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I'll try to sum it up. It's actually quite complicated. So like you mentioned, there are two entrances to the Gaza Strip: the Ares crossing point from Jordan and the Rafah crossing point in Egypt. So one on top, one towards the bottom. The Ares crossing point is a lot smoother if you can get through, you know, the permission to travel through that. It's very difficult. You basically have to get really lucky or like have a connection or something like that to get through that. Most people will travel through Egypt. It's about an 8-9 hour drive. So it's about an 8-9 hour drive from Cairo, which is, you know, because we don't have an airport in Gaza, for those of you who don't know. And so you fly into Cairo, 8-9 hour drive through the desert. It's actually kind of scary. They search you. I got searched maybe I want to say last time it was about 7 times. And so it's multiple stops. So the drive itself isn't that long, but it's the search process that takes so long. And that's why people prefer Aries, because it's just, 2 stops and you're done. But like I said, Aries is it's a more like privileged way. And if you exit through one way, you must enter through that same way. So what actually happened to me, and the reason why I'm still in Amman and not in the West Bank, is because after the ceasefire, we left through Rafah, even though I came through Aries. And so because I left through Rafah, you're not allowed to enter through another way, the Jordan way. And so it's a bit complicated, and you need all sorts of permissions, and it's very, very restricted. And even with an American passport, it does not make a difference. And so I was just at the bridge last week, and my American passport did not mean anything to them because I had a Palestinian ID. So does
Hey,
that?
Yeah, by the way, they have airport before that and they bump it.
Yeah, so actually there were 3 functioning airports in Palestine before Israel was established and before immigration started. And so I think it was Prime Minister Lloyd George who had called Palestine a swampland that must be developed. But Palestine was very much already developed. We had 3 functioning airports, both genders fully educated. We had a great education system. A lot of colleges and schools that are still present today have somehow managed to stay, alive. The healthcare system was great. I just recently was shown a website of old Palestinian photography before the Israeli immigration or the Israel state was established. And it's just astonishing how, this British lord could call this a swampland and, refer to the Palestinians as the savage people that need to be, westernized and civilized. And so it's very interesting.
I'll just add that Gaza does have an airport, and it's relatively recent, but it was bombed by Israel right before it opened.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Bob Tomlinson, you have a question. Can you unmute yourself and ask that question, please?
Yes. The news reports say that in Gaza, Hamas is not real popular. And is that the case? And also, what did Hamas think was going to happen when they started lobbing these shells? They had to know that this was going to be destruction like you've never seen on their own people. It just didn't make any sense to me.
That is a very good question, Bob. So I'll start with the first part of that question about the citizens of Gaza. So I think before and after, there was a very big shift, which is, interesting because of the second part of your question. You would think that the citizens would absolutely hate them for causing this destruction on them and bringing these missiles towards them and so forth and so on. But actually, from what I heard, there was a very split opinion about Hamas. And so I'm going to talk about Hamas as just a political military, group. Okay. As if it was, Democrats and Republicans. I'm not really going to get into the nitty gritty type of things, but so it was a very 50-50 type of things. People were just very unsure. Maybe it's time for a change of leadership, yada, yada, kind of like, this recent election that we had. And, election was coming up and people were saying, Hamas might not make it this time. And then things started going down in Sheikh Jarrah. And I don't want to say for the first time because, but for one of the first times recently, the conflict did not have anything to do with Gaza directly, but it had to do with the Palestinian nation. So this, Israel announced its plan to, continue its pattern of illegal Israeli settlements and furthering their land and taking over Palestinian villages. And there was a lot of violence in the West Bank. And though Hamas does not have control over the West Bank, they are still Palestinian. And so it was a defense of their Palestinian brothers and sisters in the West Bank, in Sheikh Jarrah. So they, in essence, were defending the Palestinians. And this is how all the Palestinians see it. Actually, anyone who was not in favor of Hamas before became in favor of them, because the Palestinians, as you might know, are a very strong and resilient people. And Hamas standing up for them, and that's what this was seen like. So Hamas was standing up for their land, standing against the oppressors, the occupiers. It was seen as a favorable thing. The people who lost their lives, obviously the families are very devastated, but this time around, we feel that the media caught onto the attention. People are starting to realize that this is not just, two people, it's not a war. And that's why I don't know if you've noticed, I try to avoid the word war, because it is not equally two-sided. This is not two equally powerful entities fighting each other. This is an oppressor and a self-defender. And so, if someone is going to come in, come to your house and, I don't know, just like punch you or something, whatever, are you just going to take it because they're bigger and stronger and more powerful than you? No, everyone has the right to self-defense, and that is a human rights thing. It's the right to self-defense. And that is what Hamas was doing, and that is how the people see it. And I'm hoping that's how the world is more and more starting to see that as well. Does that answer the question? Great.
Okay, Alice.
Okay.
Alice, you have 1 minute to ask that
All right,
question.
great. I'll make it quick.
Can I say something to her?
اتفضلي خالتي.
Go ahead, Afif.
Okay, I just want to thank you so much, and thumb up, and you have been doing a great job, and we will find so many صبية and shabab like you to defend Palestinian and to give the good real story about what's going on. I am proud of you, Habibti.
Thank you, Khalto. I really appreciate it.
I'll make it
Okay,
very quick. I think it's important to understand the context of Gaza and the reason that Hamas sends the rockets up. Haneen Zouabi, who used to be a Knesset member, a Palestinian Israeli citizen, described it as, if we're going to die, we would rather die with the cameras on us. And the reality is Gaza is under a blockade and has been since 2007, where even the amount of food is restricted to below the levels that are for sustenance. They have 98% of their water is undrinkable. They have power, electricity. Usually they have blackouts of 8 hours or more a day, every day since for over 13 years. And so and they have sewage in the street because Israel has bombed the treatment plants and so on. So the reality is 25% of the disease in Gaza is from waterborne illness. So
Can I talk something?
Yeah.
During the war, just 2 hours the power. They have power 2 hours.
I was going to say that actually it was an average of 4 hours a day, and that's an average. So good days and bad days.
So just imagine what it's like with a refrigerator that's only when you have power for 2 to 4 hours. So anyway, so the point is, the reason I believe, and this is just my opinion, that they throw the rockets up is to get media coverage, because they're being killed slowly anyway. And so the issue is, if we can get media coverage from the West of what's happening, that there are over 250 people killed, including 66 children, and we're not hitting anybody. It's clearly not an efficient way for them to kill Israelis. I mean, it's very, very expensive for them to send these rockets. So I believe it's for media coverage, but I'd love to hear Diana's thoughts.
I think so. When it comes to media coverage, I mean, the Gaza Strip, as you know, does not receive as much media coverage as the other side of things. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of those. It's kind of like one of those troll videos where it's I think it was like a TikTok or something, because TikTok and Instagram and all these like social media platforms, they actually played a very big role this time around. But I saw a video of a soldier, and this was real, it wasn't like one of the troll videos I mentioned, but he was like sitting down and they're putting like a little band-aid on his arm from like a scrape that he got. And so no matter, there are children dying on one hand, and however much media attention we get, it's never going to be as much as the other side gets for a much less severe damage that is happening. And so one little thing happens in Israel, the whole world is going to know about it, because they have a larger media coverage than Gaza. And so I would say that it does go back. I mean, this time around, the media coverage was a lot more, and that was mainly because of the Palestinians that were outside of the Gaza Strip. And all the voices, although it wasn't just an Arab or Muslim issue this time around, it was a human rights issue. Actually, there was a video I forgot to show you guys, but it was a Jewish Voices for Palestine video of Orthodox Jews at one of the protests, and they are chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And so it really showed that this is a human rights issue. This is not about religion. It is not about just Palestine. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I'm sure you guys have heard that. And so that's really what this is all about.
One last question. This is really to both Diana and Edie. What our membership is really interested in, what can they do to help the issue? Okay, so I have Diana, I have the GoFundMe link that I'm gonna share with the membership. Anything else that we can do, here, let us know. And when we will, if we have to write letters or contact our elected officials, or whatever we can do, we'll do it.
I would just say, like I mentioned before, social media is, we're in this age more powerful than we have ever been before. And that's why, we are more hopeful that there is change coming. And so I would just say, keep talking about the issue. Don't shy away from it. Keep posting, keep yourself updated. I follow, majority of the people that I do follow on my Instagram account is, like the IMEU, Jewish Voices for Palestine, Palestinian Roots. I try to focus on unbiased sources, like bigger organizations. When anyone asks me for a feed, I always recommend Jewish Voices for Palestine, because it is very, especially to non-Muslim or non-Arabs, because they can't be like, oh well, this is an unbiased source. Well, it's coming from directly the other side. And so I feel like, Jewish Voices for Palestine is a source that I highly recommend. The IMEU is also one that is constantly updating on all their social media platforms. And of course, feel free to follow me. I post anything, or I repost anything that I see. And whenever I am there, I always post as much as I can. I did drop my email as well, if you guys have any other questions, or if there's anything else that I can do to help. I love speaking out about the subject, getting to know other people who are interested in the subject, and just being more involved. And so I love opportunities like this. And so please feel free to reach out to me.
You mentioned Jewish Voices for Palestine.
Are
they affiliated with Jewish Voices for Peace?
Sorry, it's Jewish Voices for Peace.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes, yes. Sorry about that. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, of course.
Yeah, we actually had speakers from the San Antonio chapter a couple of months back talk to us. Okay. Hey, and Edie, do you have anything to add?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything Diana said, those are wonderful resources, but you guys, you're an Amnesty International. Get some, not do what Diana said, but also take advantage of the resources within the movement. There's urgent actions. There's legislative briefs on how to support 2509 that was introduced by Betty McCollum. Sign up for that newsletter I mentioned, because that is sort of like there's a smorgasbord of what you guys can do as far as locally having educational events, passing on the social media that Amnesty puts out and sharing it with your community. But then there's also a lot of lobbying opportunities. There's things you can do as a local group. And that newsletter pretty much lays out everything that Amnesty is doing. And you can come together as a group and say, you know what, we can't do everything, but let's support this, supporting 2509. Let's support the House Resolution 2509. And so, yes, follow all these great things, including Diana, but oh my gosh, get connected and hooked into what's going on with Israel-Palestine within Amnesty. I don't think Amnesty does a great job in getting the word out, but there's a lot that happens and goes on, and a lot of things that you guys can do. You all are obviously very interested in justice and accountability and human rights and in this region. So please, and I just wanted to also say, I saw a question about history, where you can go to learn the history. All I can say is don't believe me, don't believe Diana, don't believe the newspapers. Get an abundance of different kind of sources and then turn on your critical thinking skills. But I was thinking about that. And if you're looking for a good scholarly source to really look into the history, check out the Institute for Palestine Studies. I think Diana mentioned this book, but these books have been digitized, but they give a very good history of Palestine in the 1800s all the way up to 1948. And then also they've digitized information on the villages within Israel proper that have been destroyed and no longer exist, or exist but have been taken over by other people. So the Institute for Palestine Studies is a great historical scholarly look at the region. There's a whole bunch of books that you could read. But mainly, especially here in the United States, you're going to get a lot of conflicting information. So know who you can trust. Usually it's someone within Amnesty. It's very self-serving to say, contact me. But Amnesty is a neutral organization where we don't take a position on the final resolution, one state, two state, co-federation, but we will fight for justice and fight for human rights and accountability. And so if you have a question about a source, you're free to contact me and I'll let you know that that's an excellent source or that's a good source, but some things. And Jewish Voice for Peace is a great resource. Thank you for letting me say that. Because while Diana was talking, I'm like, Amnesty. Amnesty.
Okay, so Diana and Edie, thank you very much for joining our monthly meeting. This was really a big help. And Alex, thank you for sharing your book information. I will put all that together in an email to our membership. And yeah, we definitely want to do whatever we can to help the Palestinians and to help educate the people who are not very familiar with the issue. So I want to just
Thank you so much for having me.
thank you, and Diana, go get some sleep so you can get up at 9 o'clock and attend the class.
Thank you so much, brother.
And I want to thank your dad. He's been listening. I think he joined after his work or something.
Yes, yeah, I see
help
that.
me with coordinating all this because I think you were traveling or something when I approached him about this. So Brother Akram, come on, show yourself up before we begin the meeting. He must be home.
Yeah, I think is my mother still on here?
Yes, he's on mute himself. He's not with me.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, guys,
Well,
thank
yeah,
you very much.
thank
And
you. I
you all have a
appreciate it.
good day. Our next meeting is on August 2nd, Monday, 6:30 p.m. Central. So we will send you notice about who these speakers are. And once again, thank you very much.